The night she was sold, the moon hung low and yellow,
Please, these are
like
my
it was a
wares, and they're
shame to
worth more
watch.
than that.
$4.
More time.
That was the price placed on her life. Not her name, because no one bothered to ask it. Not her dreams, because no one cared if she had any left. Just her body, her breath, her future, folded neatly into a debt she never made. The crowd at the settlement office smelled of dust, sweat, and cheap whiskey. Men laughed too loudly. Boots scraped the wooden floor, and coins clinked like they were more important than blood. Her wrists were raw from where her brother had gripped her too tightly, afraid she might run, as if she had anywhere left to go. Her father was dead. Her mother followed him into the ground a year later. The farm failed. The debt grew like a sickness, and when the lender came, smiling with rotten teeth and ink-stained fingers, the solution was simple: sell the girl. She stood barefoot on cold planks, wearing a dress that had once been white. Her hair was braided because someone thought it made her look obedient. She didn't cry. Crying had stopped working a long time ago. Then the cowboy stepped forward. He didn't push, didn't shout, didn't bargain like he was buying cattle. He simply placed $4 worn on the table and said, "I'll take her." His voice was calm, too calm. That scared her more than the others. Before the story pulls you deeper, before freedom, fire, and fate collide, subscribe to our channel and share this story with your friends. Stories like this don't survive without you. Now hold on tight, because this is only the beginning. The ride to his land took 2 days. 2 days of silence, broken only by hoofbeats and wind. He rode ahead, never looking back, as if she were already a ghost following him. When they stopped to rest, he handed her food without a word. When the night came, he made camp far enough away that she could breathe. She waited for the moment men like him always chose, the moment kindness cracked into ownership. It never came. At dawn of the 3rd day, they reached a spread of land so wide it looked empty. A weather-beaten cabin stood alone against the horizon, leaning but stubborn. The cowboy finally turned to her. "You don't have to be afraid," he said. Fear laughed inside her chest. She had been afraid since she learned to speak. "You're my wife by paper," he continued, "but not by chains." She didn't understand. Not yet. Inside the cabin there was one bed, and a blanket laid on the floor. "I'll sleep here," he said, already kneeling. "You take the bed." That night she didn't sleep, not because she feared him, but because hope is a dangerous thing when you've been starved of it. Days turned into weeks. He taught her how to ride without reins, how to read tracks in the dirt, how to fix a fence and shoot straight. He spoke to her like she mattered, like her thoughts carried weight. When she burned dinner, he laughed. When she cried in the barn one night, he pretended not to see, but left a lantern burning. People in town whispered. "A bought wife," they said. "She's trapped," they said, but something was changing. One evening, as the sun bled red across the plains, he handed her a folded paper. It was a deed, land, in her name. "I bought your freedom the moment I bought you," he said quietly. "This is proof." Her hands shook so hard she dropped it. No one had ever given her anything without taking something first. And then the past came riding in. The lender, the brother, the men who thought $4 still owned her. They came with threats and lies, claiming contracts and debts, claiming her body like property. The cowboy stood between them and her, rifle steady, eyes cold as winter steel. "She's not for sale," he said. "Not now, not ever." When they left, defeated and furious, she realized something terrifying. She wasn't trapped. She was choosing to stay, and that scared her more than chains ever had. Time passed. Seasons shifted. The land bloomed under her hands. She laughed more. She slept through the night, and slowly, without ceremony, the space between them closed. One night, during a storm that rattled the cabin like bones, she reached for him. Not because she was owned, not because she was bought, but because she was free, and freedom chose him. Years later, people told the story wrong. They said she was saved. The truth was better. She saved herself. And a cowboy who refused to believe a woman could be bought for $4 proved that sometimes the greatest rebellion is kindness, and that a forced marriage, when met with honor instead of greed, can become a doorway to freedom. The morning after the storm felt like a lie. Sunlight spilled across the plains as if nothing in the world had ever broken, as if people were not bought and sold for the price of a cheap meal, as if fear did not still wake her before dawn with its fingers around her throat. She stood at the doorway of the cabin, barefoot in the cool dirt, watching the cowboy saddle his horse. His name was Elias. She had learned it slowly, the way you learn to trust fire again after it burns you. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who had learned long ago that shouting wasted energy. Every motion had purpose. Every buckle, every knot, every glance toward the horizon carried the weight of someone who had survived things he never spoke about. "You don't have to stay today," he said without turning. "Town's a long ride." She nodded, though part of her wanted to follow him just to prove she could. Freedom was new. It itched. It scared her. It whispered that if she didn't hold it tightly, it would disappear. After he rode off, the silence pressed in. She cleaned the cabin not because it needed it, but because stillness made her thoughts too loud. She scrubbed the table where the $4 had once rested in her imagination. She swept dust that would return by evening. She stopped when she realized her hands were shaking. This place was safe. That was the problem. Safety felt temporary to someone who had never been allowed to keep it. By midday, a rider appeared on the horizon. Her heart slammed into her ribs before her mind could catch up. The man dismounted slowly, hands visible, smile thin. He wore a city coat dust-stained from travel and carried papers tucked under his arm like weapons. "I figured I'd find you here," he said. She didn't move, didn't speak. "I represent interests," he continued, stepping closer. "People who believe there's been a misunderstanding." Her fingers curled into fists. She thought of the rifle hanging above the door. She thought of Elias miles away. "You were sold," the man said smoothly. "Marriage papers filed, debt unpaid. Some folks think your cowboy's generosity doesn't cancel contracts." "I'm free," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. He laughed. "Freedom's a story men tell when they want to feel noble." She raised the rifle. The sound of a second horse stopped the world. Elias rode in fast, dust flying, eyes sharp. He took in the scene in one glance and dismounted between them like a wall. "Lee." "V," Elias said. The man scoffed. "You don't own." "She owns herself," Elias interrupted. His voice was calm, but something lethal lived beneath it. "And I suggest you remember that." The man backed away, muttering about courts and consequences. When he finally rode off, the silence returned, but it was different now. She was shaking openly. Elias didn't touch her. He just stood close enough that she could feel his presence like an anchor. "They'll come again," she said. "I know," he replied, "and every time they'll find less ground to stand on." That night she told him everything. The debt, the hunger, the way her brother wouldn't meet her eyes the day he signed her away. The nights she lay awake, imagining what kind of man would buy her and what he would take. Elias listened without interrupting. When she finished, he stared into the fire for a long time. "I was raised by a woman who'd been owned once," he said quietly. "She taught me one thing worth remembering." "What?" "That freedom isn't given. It's defended." The next months were not peaceful. Letters arrived. Threats followed. A summons came from a judge in town who had once shared whiskey with the lender. Elias saddled up without hesitation. "You don't have to come," he told her. She mounted beside him. "I'm done hiding." The courtroom smelled like old wood and old lies. Men stared. Whispers slithered. The lender smirked like victory was already his. Then she spoke, not loudly, not angrily. She spoke like someone who had survived. She told them she had been sold without consent, that the debt was not hers, that the marriage contract had been signed under coercion. Elias presented the deed. Witnesses spoke. The judge shifted uncomfortably. When the ruling came, it cracked the room in half. No ownership, no debt, no claim. She walked out into sunlight, a free woman in the eyes of the law. Outside, her brother waited. He looked smaller than she remembered. "I didn't know what else to do," he whispered. She studied his face, the fear, the regret, the love tangled with weakness. "I know," she said, "but I did." She turned away. Freedom sometimes means leaving people behind. Life settled again, but not into stillness, into growth. The land flourished under shared labor. Laughter became common. Touch became natural. Love arrived quietly, without ceremony, without chains. One evening, as they watched the sky burn gold, Elias took her hand. "You're free," he said. "If you ever want to leave." She squeezed his fingers. "I'm staying," she said. "Not because I was bought, not because I have to, because I choose you." The past never fully vanished. It never does. But it lost its power. And the woman once sold for $4 stood tall on land that was hers, beside a man who understood that love without freedom is just another kind of prison.